All right, hello, everyone. We're just going to give a couple of minutes before we formally start for people who are joining us a tiny bit late. Thank you for your patience. To those who just joined us, we're waiting one more minute before starting. Thank you for your patience. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome from different parts of the world. My name is Vincent. I am the global lead for SBC at UNICEF, and I'm very happy to host this webinar today. We are joined by a variety of colleagues and practitioners from UNICEF, WHO, IFRC, Africa CDC, donors and partners, and importantly, the very people who contributed stories to this magazine, particularly from the Mpox affected countries. Today, we are releasing our second Change magazine, Hidden in Plain Sight, and we will provide the online access at the end of this webinar. This is not just a launch or a technical webinar, it's also a moment of reflection on the world ahead of us and a recognition that of the contribution and the courage of those who work at the front line of public health emergencies. The ideas that we put forward in this publication are unfortunately very relevant because of the emergency landscape ahead of us and the prospective analysis, which is unfortunately predicting more crises, more frequent crises, more severe, more complex, and more interconnected. What we have learned from recent years is that in all of the crises that we have faced, including the many public health emergency ones, community trust, community participation, and community leadership have been as critical as vaccines, beds, or PPE. How do we prevent the next pandemic? That's a bold question. The reason we asked it is because that's actually the title of a book by Bill Gates, which offers plenty of solutions in terms of surveillance, labs, vaccines, coordination, but kind of overlooks community participation, leadership, and issues related to equity. Now, we won't be able to prevent outbreaks from starting across the world in the future. Zoonotic diseases in particular will keep on popping up as humans continue to control nature, destroy nature. But we collectively, as a group of authors, would argue that we can prevent outbreaks from turning into epidemics, and we can prevent epidemics from turning into pandemics by investing more in the communities in at-risk and affected areas, and relying on the very people who live there for better surveillance, to track the disease and stay ahead of the curve, for helping to convince their peers, their neighbors in ways that are culturally appropriate, for guiding and owning the design of interventions that match their daily realities and really help communities prepare and overcome challenges. And of course, rebuild the trust in authorities and in the systems that we have lost in so many places. Our first magazine, which was titled Why Don't You Just Behave, focused on development interventions from the perspective of power and behavior. Now, the new issue focuses on community engagement in crisis how it looks like and how it should look like. You will hear us talk about RCCE, which is risk communication and community engagement. And I apologize in advance for the jargon that we use. But RCC is basically the work of connecting with at-risk and affected population to develop a working relationship around public health emergency prevention and response. We are largely focusing on the Mpox response, which is quite emblematic of the many issues we faced along the years in this field, including stigma, fear, misinformation, but also how communities organize and respond in ways that are efficient. I want to give a shout out to all the RCC colleagues and teams who did a huge amount of work across Africa, often providing fast, under-resourced, yet very necessary support to communities. The name of the magazine, Hidden in Plain Sight, is actually dedicated to the people on the front lines of public health emergencies, what we call the everyday heroes, who help their peers connect the health systems with the people who need it, often in a way that's fully voluntary. There are dozens of thousands of these dedicated fighters across Africa, and today we'll start by listening to one of them, Delphine from Bujumbura. The colleagues in Burundi have put together a 5-minute video for us. So thank you, Gausu, Elizabeth, and Tim for the testimony. Let's spend 5 minutes listening to Delphine.
Sorry, Vincent, it's still a bit staggered.
D'abord, qui ont eu peur d'être confinés comme on essaie d'expliquer davantage aux personnes qui ont eu peur de l'épidémie, car ils continuent à ne pas se pénaliser pour aller se faire soigner, qu'ils vont retrouver. D'ailleurs, tu vas me dire renforcer davantage notre sensibilisation.
Chaque jour, des mobilisatrices communautaires luttent pour réinstaurer la confiance, expliquer, rassurer et convaincre. C'est le quotidien de Delphine Dachaï Saba, mobilisatrice communautaire à Kanyosha, l'un des quartiers les plus touchés par la Mpox, dans le district sanitaire de Bujumbura Sud.
Dans le cadre de la Mpox, signification dans la mobilisatrice communautaire, comme rôle, d'éclairer la communauté, de changer de comportement face aux épidémies comme l'Mpox. Car il y a beaucoup, par exemple, dans notre communauté, la population n'accepte pas les épidémies. Parce que ce sont des pratiques qui viennent de l'étranger, qui sont fabriquées au laboratoire pour aider les Africains. So là, il faut quand même qu'il y ait une sensibilisation pour expliquer bien à la communauté ce que c'est l'épidémie.
Un travail qui n'est pas de tout repos, mais Delphine tient à jouer pleinement son rôle pour informer, faire évoluer les comportements et sauver des vies face à la Mpox.
Pour donner un exemple concret, lors de la sensibilisation, nous avons rencontré une famille qui a 2 enfants. La communauté nous a montré que dans cette maison, il y a des enfants qui présentent ces symptômes que vous venez de dire. Et nous avons cette famille et la maman de ces enfants a refusé qu'il n'y ait pas des enfants qui présentent ces symptômes. Mais quand même, nous avons essayé de continuer la sensibilisation en disant que les enfants soignés à temps, ils ne sont pas. Il faut guérir très rapidement. Il ne faut pas vous rendre pour guérir. Devant les soignants, oui, et ça va être très bien. Alors, nous avons médité de sensibilisation pour que la communauté comprenne que la Mpox est une maladie comme les autres. Et nous avons aussi des témoignages Nous avons rencontré des familles haïtiennes qui avaient connu la Mpox, en particulier aux autres c'est assez fort.
Grâce à l'engagement de volontaires comme Delphine, la communauté comprend mieux comment faire face à des épidémies comme la Mpox. Soutenir les mobilisatrices communautaires comme Delphine, c'est renforcer la première ligne de défense contre les épidémies. C'est aussi protéger les familles et sauver des vies. Donnons-leur les moyens de continuer convenablement leur travail de terrain.
Quand je vais passer voir autour de l'homme de ma terre, je l'air de être les gens s'appuyer avec cette formation, aussi pour avoir la moyens suffisants pour faire correctement la sensibilisation. Plus, nous aussi, nous sommes vraiment sophistiqués en niveau de télé, nous avons besoin d'art réfléchir. Plus, nous avons besoin aussi de aussi les portes pour aussi nous protéger contre les épidémies. Ce que je suggère encore, la prise en charge des services sociaux pour aider la population à gérer les humeurs. En cas d'épidémie, il faut qu'il y ait une intervention qui est prise en prise en charge des services sociaux pour que la maladie en cette communauté et se faire aussi plus rapidement possible pour les enfants de permettre de garantir la population.
There we go. Very nice listening to Delphine, and glad that we have the chance to share the perspective of people coming from the field. I want to give the floor to our next speaker today, which is my colleague, Dr. Douglas Noble. Thank you, Douglas, for being here. Douglas is the head of emergency preparedness, health emergency preparedness and response for UNICEF. He was also managing the UNICEF's very first incident management team, which we set up during Mpox. Douglas, over to you for your remarks, and thank you again for joining.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Vincent, and great to see so many colleagues from so many different places on the call. I think the Mpox response really embedded public health partnership, and so it's always good to be in these moments where we reflect on that and we look at things together in retrospect and share successes and learnings and such like. So yeah, thank you very, very much for all being here. On UNICEF's side, we had the opportunity with the Mpox emergency and the public health emergency of international concern to test our new incident management system post-COVID. That involved appointing a global incident manager and having one incident management team across the organization to help with coordination. We had lessons learned from that, but we also had successes as well, and I think have overall been better prepared for the next pandemic. Some of the best moments that I had during the Mpox response were those moments of partnership, a bit like today. And I remember very fondly being in the field in Equateur, in DRC, with Africa CDC, with WHO, with the government and with other partners. And I think it's that type of partnership working that makes such a big difference when it comes to responding in the field. We certainly saw the huge importance of risk communication and community engagement. And of course, it's not enough to just do simple things. You can't just put up a poster that says Mpox exists. That'll only have just a very marginal benefit. But you need to really understand communities. You need to talk to community members and leaders. You need to talk to vulnerable groups and communities. Find out, how are people thinking? Who do they listen to, and how will we change behavior to make sure that transmission is broken? And that was something I think as a group of partners we were able to do, and I'm hugely grateful to many of you who are on the call. And I hope the things that didn't go so well and that we learn that we'll be able to do better next time. So really wish you well in this call. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to stay for all of it, but I very much look forward to catching up with the team afterwards. So Vincent, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Douglas. And yeah, I know you are in Geneva currently coordinating actually with the partners on public health emergencies. It was lovely for you to join us. Thank you for being here. All right. Moving on. So we just heard from our colleague Douglas. Let's dive a little bit into some content here. We will share again the link to this magazine at the end of the webinar. The magazine is not a glossy report. It's actually a collection of portraits, of testimonies, of reflections from health workers, from community mobilizers, from RCC experts. The main categories of articles include what you see here on the screen. So we have a lot of field insight and spotlights from a few countries, Uganda, DRC, Central African Republic, Rwanda, Burundi, and Cote d'Ivoire. Again, huge thank you for the colleagues, to the colleagues, not just for the work that they do on the ground, but for also contributing to sharing their insights into this new publication. We have a few frontline portraits, which I'll talk about in a minute. Quite a significant focus on behavioral insights and stories about data and how we use it or how we don't use it. We have a few reflections on system challenges and leadership learnings. And then, of course, all of this mounts into advice for preparedness and future crisis. So in a nutshell, the magazine captures what worked in RCC during MPOX and other emergencies, but also what didn't, or where we were too slow or too top-down or too short-term. And it's meant to feed into how we design future responses, addressing issues related to funding, to staffing, to partnerships, and importantly, on how seriously we take community insights and community feedback. I'll take a couple of minutes to highlight some of our top messages from the publication. First, as I said, the magazine is an ode to frontline workers, and if it conveys their lived experience across much of the articles, we also have 4 featured portraits that you will be able to read. These are the people you see on the left. So starting from the top left, there's Janine from Burundi, who tells us about the courage that it takes to go knock at every single door when people are afraid and when you yourself got MPOX. We have then Joseph from DRC, who shows what happens when communities organize themselves for the response. Isaac from Uganda, the man with the megaphone, kind of reminds us that listening to people is as important as delivering medicine or messages in his case. And then the last one is Frère Jean de Dieu from Rwanda, who shows us how faith and local leadership combined can help keep trust alive in a crisis. Some of the main lessons are here on the slide. They include the fact that trust, relationships, and genuine engagement drive emergency response. The whole issue shows how participation and trust are game changers in stopping outbreaks. We also highlight how social and community data must guide the real decisions, not just field reports. And unfortunately, so far, operational decisions are not very influenced by the insights about at-risk and affected people. We talk a lot about local leadership and two-way accountability as the backbones of community resilience. We really need to genuinely build local capacity, make localization more than a buzzword, and work with partners and local actors. There's a strong power and equity question here, and we need to reflect on our own responses and who gets to decide whose voice counts in governance and in coordination. And finally, we talk about frontline and community systems and how these systems are need to be more visible, more valued, and more funded and sustained. Here, we are not talking about community systems in abstract. We're talking about the real people, the community health workers, the local leaders, the youth, the women's group, who are exhausted, who are underpaid, invisible, yet often carrying the entire response. All right, I'm going to be welcoming Rachel from our partner Anthropologica, who advised us on one of the featured articles about the use of data. Rachel, welcome. Nice to see you. the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Vincent. I was really excited about contributing to this article about insights to inaction, because it really reflects on how our ability as RCCE practitioners to collect data and to share it, to really make sure that community perspectives and experiences were represented in the MPOX response wasn't as effective as it could have been in many cases. And this is despite so much experience in RCCE, so many tools, so many coordination structures across different countries. We really had the opportunity to be able to collect so many different types of data, and the article goes into that, to make sure that that data was really used to respond to the needs of affected communities. And you know, I was just thinking as we were listening to Beatrice, like we really had the data and we had the experience to make her work as a frontline worker easier. We had the information to be able to develop targeted, tailored materials that really spoke to the realities of the affected communities. And yet we kept sharing IEC materials, and I could see them in her video, where we didn't really prioritize the most critical behaviors. You know, we focused on hand washing, and we talked about how important it was to make sure we were cooking and not handling animals too much, but we didn't focus on things that were more critical, like making sure people were doing skin checking. And we had years and years of experience implementing HIV projects that weren't stigmatizing to specific communities. And yet when we went in with the MPOX messaging, focusing on sexual transmission, it really impacted on sex workers. And there's an example in DRC where it involved resulting in high levels of stigma and sharply reduced case reporting as a result. And I think the article goes into why it's so important to think about how we can communicate RCC evidence better, particularly in structures where they focus on epidemiological evidence and maybe don't prioritize evidence around community behaviours and perspectives, and how in many countries we don't have a strong system to make sure that we're tracking how we're sharing this data and holding response actors accountable to really acting on it. And when we use indicators like people reached with IEC materials or messages, etc., we're not making sure that people are really able to act on the critical behaviours that we're telling them about. But the article also has some bright points and some really good recommendations. We have excellent examples of how we have been able to collect RCCE data and make sure that it's used. And the article finishes with 7 recommendations around strengthening national capacities to generate and own behavioural data, making sure that we're collecting data and communicating it better by looking more at the outcomes of RCCE activities rather than the activities themselves, and reporting on that data through integrated dashboards. So response actors will be looking at epidemiological data alongside data around community behaviours and really thinking about those things together. But we need to, as a community, become more credible and clearer communicators of this RCCE evidence and really speak for the communities that we're trying to talk for and trying to support through these responses, and keeping in mind the needs of these frontline workers like Beatrice as well. And finally, we need to be holding donors and governments accountable to really support the implementation of the interventions that fit the community that we're trying to support in these different outbreaks. And we can do that by making sure that the data that we collect is shared and that it's used. And so the interventions that we're recommending are really tailored to what frontline workers need and to what the communities that they're supporting can use. Thanks so much, Vincent. It was really great being a part of this.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, people can go read the article. There's a lot of in-depth insights in there. I was looking at it. Thank you, Rachel, for actually bringing it the positive perspective into this question. Some of us have focused on when the data was not used, and we have actually tracked a lot of quality data that didn't convert into operational decision. Rachel really helped us find good examples, Zambia, Burundi, Malawi, where we did use the data. And thanks to Anthropologica as well for helping us unearth some of these important social insights. We're going to dive into a second article quickly here. I'm welcoming my colleague Aru to share her reflection about community systems. Aru, over to you.
Thank you, Vincent, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. It's such a pleasure to have such a big number. I was looking at the participants, and it's amazing. Thank you so much for all that inspiration and that acknowledgement. You know, while Rachel was talking about the article, and I was just thinking to myself that summarizing all that hard work in a 2-minute speech or a 2-minute inspirational note is probably the most challenging thing to do. And that's the reason why you need to go to the PHE magazine and take a look at it in details. I'm going to be talking a little bit on the short-term heroes and the long-term orphans, where I have contributed along with several colleagues of mine. And it's called The Case for Sustaining Community Systems Beyond the Crises. I want to start with a little quote which says that every outbreak starts with a whisper, but ends with a roar. I can leave that for you to unpack it a little, but the question is, will that roar be panic or preparedness? And the answer depends on one thing, which is trust. And that's what the article talks about. Now, every outbreak follows a familiar choreography, as we all know. It's about detection, deployment, and delivery. But time and again, we've seen that the missing link isn't the supplies, isn't the bigger facilities, but it's trust. And trust built through sustained partnership with communities, which is so crucial. I know we all work around trust. I know we all understand trust. But during Ebola, and all of us, probably 80% of our colleagues who have worked in Ebola or several other public health emergencies, we know families hid their sick. During COVID-19, testing centers inspired fear. And during the recent outbreak of Mpox, stigma and misinformation kept people very, very silent. The lesson was very, very clear to us. Without trust, even the best equipped response falters or slows down. And that's the reason why we bring this little article to you, which talks about how our heroes, how our communities, and how our organizations or community-based platforms supported us to build that trust in communities. The article also goes on to talk a little bit around community systems and community strengthening. Those networks of local leaders, which I was just referring to, the volunteers and the organizations, the faith-based leaders, they're just not emergency add-ons, right? They are the core health security infrastructure for us, especially when we're looking at RCC interventions. If you recall, when Sierra Leone introduced community care centers during Ebola, the cases reported rose by at least a double. And what happened in that process was that the thousands of lives were saved because a large number of people were going to the centers and reporting themselves, because proximity and cultural relevance by those emergency response teams in collaboration with the communities really worked. Now, we cannot afford to rebuild trust from scratch every time there is an emergency response. And we all know that one-off campaigns erode confidence and waste resources too. Instead, the article really talks about the importance of investing early and consistently in community systems, linking them to health services, embedding them in governance, and sustaining them beyond crises. Take a note, this is exactly what the article is all about. It also contains a little bit of actions and recommendations for our community engagement practitioners, as well as our decision makers. It talks about funding community systems as core infrastructure. So we're looking at allocating predictable long-term financing for community networks, bringing in the aspect of community protection, and not just as emergency budgets. So trust is built for the next crisis. We are prepared. It also talks about integrating RCC into national health systems, like we all know, and it should not be an afterthought. It also talks a lot about measuring trust and adaptability as key indicators, and not just a mere mention of trust. Tracking trust levels, tracking community feedback and responsiveness alongside the epidemiological data, which most of our partners on the ground collect, and to ensure that those interventions are relevant and effective. On that note, I would like to stop and urge all of you who are participating today to please go ahead and look at our PHE magazine. And I'll play a little social media influencer here. Go like and share it. It's on LinkedIn, and enjoy reading the PHE magazine. Thank you so much. And over to you, Vincent.
thanks, Saru, for the PR marketing effort at the end. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with your comments about, this, what we're talking about being core part of the core health capacity and core health architecture. You're absolutely right. That's unfortunately not the most common understanding. For those who are interested in trust, beyond the concept itself, just flagging that there was an article in the Lancet after COVID that showed that trust in authorities and trust across communities was the biggest predictor of the spread of the virus during COVID. So we're talking about very concrete things here. All right. Why does this matter now? Just a few reflections. First, because Mpox is not over, and neither are the emergencies. Africa CDC still considers Mpox a continental emergency as we speak, and it's unfolded on top of cholera, conflict, climate shocks, and other outbreaks. So how we learn from this will shape how ready we are for the next time. It's also because we made big promises after COVID about community engagement, and this was the very first test. We all said that we'd put communities at the center, that we would invest in RCCE, use social data in real time. Mpox shows where we kept those promises and also where we quietly slipped back into business as usual. And lastly, it's because systems and people we are talking about here are at the crossroads. The frontline workers, the local organizations, the community systems can either become the backbone of future preparedness, or they could remain invisible. The unfunded add-ons we only remember where things are getting very wrong. So some of the biggest questions that we raise and we don't necessarily fully answer is how do we move from using communities as recipients to sharing power with them? What will it take for social and community data to genuinely shape decisions every day? How do we stop producing short-term heroes and long-term orphans? That's a reference to the title of one of the articles we just discussed. And then when the next emergency hits, and it will, what must be different in how we show up? So let's explore these with a few short reflections. And from here, I'm handing over to my colleague Audrey, who handles knowledge management for us. Audrey, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, everyone, for joining this magazine launch. As Vincent mentioned, we're now going to hear from 3 colleagues, and we're going to start with Miriam Luanga. She's our SBC specialist in UNICEF Rwanda, and she's going to talk about how do we strengthen local leadership and capacities. As always, if you have questions for our presenters, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. Miriam, over to you.
Thanks very much, Audrey. Just a correction, I'm in Uganda, actually, not the Rwanda office. Not that I have any issue with being in the Rwanda office. Those are my brothers and sisters next door, but I'm in the Uganda office. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're talking about strengthening local leadership and capacities. And maybe I just want to start with a quote that says, when an outbreak strikes, the first responders are not always doctors in white coats. They are local leaders, village health teams, and community champions. And as far as Uganda is concerned, one of the key things we've seen that alongside our community health workers, local leadership is the frontline defense. Without it, even the best national plans falter. So I'm going to take a few seconds to talk about why local leadership matters. 3 areas: trusted voices, ownership, and sustainability. We've seen as the double outbreaks we had in Uganda this year of Ebola and Mpox, which spread rapidly in our high-risk communities. So we're talking about markets, fishing villages, urban areas. Our local leaders, village health teams, religious leaders, teachers, youth leaders, and local councils were the trusted voices for mobilization, rumor management, and countering misinformation and stigma faster than external actors. In terms of ownership and sustainability, we saw that during the Uganda's Ebola response, that empowering our resident district commissioners and other district task forces, we managed to almost ensure 99% of contacts were traced and followed up and helped to reduce stigma. So leadership at the grassroots builds resilience beyond donor-driven interventions. In terms of insights from Mpox and Ebola, because it was a double response for us, we've seen that community engagement works. I think most of us know on this call know that it works. Doing integrated RCC reached over 258,000 people through dialogue, social listening, addressing misinformation and stigma. Another insight is the gender inclusion and equity. For Mpox vaccination, we made a concerted attempt to focus on women and young women because we know that the burden of taking care of the sick falls on women in the home, and a lot of the times they are not focused upon in terms of campaigns for not only prevention but also vaccination. So strategies inclusive strategies matter a lot. We noticed some capacity gaps as well. So while we have the RCC out in front, we're lacking logistics, we're lacking in PPE. Some of the leadership activities are underfunded. Some of our local NGOs lack multi-sector emergency capacity, so that slows down the response. For practical steps to strengthen leadership, we noted that it was good to institutionalize training. Can we link community-based surveillance training and RCC so that we moved in tandem for outbreak detection, training not only VHTs, but also our local leaders and schools as well as areas for CBS. For leveraging existing structures, we also noticed that if we empower our district task forces, use the existing structures of health unit management committees, and also our water and hygiene committees at community level, they can support the decision-making and rapid mobilization required to prevent an outbreak or respond to an outbreak. Also, the use of digital tools was key for us for systems alerts and contact tracing. That was one of the key insights. So lastly, opportunities for action. I think we need to look at capacity building programs that are available, whether it's under WHO's HEPR framework or IGAD's Prepare project, that can provide funding and technical support for the workforce development and cross-border collaboration as well, because that's one of the issues we see, especially in the hot zone of East Africa, where we see our borders are quite porous. What community leadership incentives are not necessarily financial, but how do we recognize their leadership, them stepping up, the community champions to sustain engagement? And lastly, partnerships. Our collaboration with faith-based organizations and the local media was also key in supporting also translating materials so that we are amplifying culturally sensitive messaging. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Indeed, Uganda. Sorry about that. And now we're going to hear about Priscilla Madzinga-Kusena. She is the SBC coordinator for Africa CDC, and she is going to talk about what does it take to ensure evidence is used in real time.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. I'm in the field. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Loud and clear.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you and congratulations UNICEF and partners on this powerful magazine. For me, using evidence in real time comes down to three things. Number one, we need to have simple and fast feedback loops. My understanding and thinking is that evidence must move at the speed of people's lives. That means we have to link community voices, we have to link frontline data, we have to link all the behavioral intelligence and social listening into very simple feedback loops so that what we see on the ground today can actually inform decisions this week and not next quarter or next year. So this is definitely something that needs to be strengthened across the work that we do in public health emergencies and in risk communication and community engagements. In the magazine, there are a couple of pieces also speaking to what it takes to ensure evidence is used in real time. And one of the key issues the articles also highlight is around the power to act at the right level, which is my second point. We can have perfect dashboards. We can actually do so many things at the back end, but still be very slow if the different levels of implementation cannot use the information to act. So real-time use of evidence needs clear mandates and flexibility for the frontline workers at different levels of implementation so that they can adjust their messages, outreach programs, and microplans without actually waiting for layers of clearance. In my experience as well, which brings me to the third and last point, for us to be able to use evidence in real time, we also need a learning and not a blaming culture as we do different kinds of implementation for public health emergencies. Real-time evidence will sometimes tell us that our first idea was wrong, and that actually requires us to immediately adjust. So we must be willing to listen, admit that this is not working, and change course quickly. That humility, when we implement interventions during emergencies, is actually what turns data into better outcomes, empower local decision makers, and protect a culture of learning. And actually, when we look at all the pieces and articles in the magazines, if we can use evidence in real time, then platforms like this magazine can actually become fuel for timely action that saves lives. So congratulations again to Vincent and colleagues. And thank you so much for this opportunity from Africa CDC. We've been leading this work across the continent, and it has been very rewarding. Thank you, and back to you, Audrey.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, and I particularly appreciate your request on humility and your remarks. Now I'm going to give the floor to Michael Coleman. He's the director of Common Thread, and he's going to talk about how do we strengthen systems before a crisis hits.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. I have 2 quick minutes. What I really want to do is, rather than rehash the article, which I know a lot of you are going to go out and read immediately because it's fantastic, you're going to find a lot of great insights and advice. I want to really reflect the discussion that I want to say 7 or 8 contributors to this article discussed, debated, leading to the writing of this. That's Aru, Hawa, Raisa, Burema, Vaishali, Miriam, and others, to really talk about what are the challenges and opportunities in dealing with multiple and compounding crises. So I'm going to talk about 6 things. Number 1, trust as the first responder. So this has come up a few times, but as we know, in fragile context, trust in systems, government, partners is already present, or it's not, before the arrival of any public health or any other kind of crisis. Trust, mistrust is built over time and not overnight. So when you're facing the challenges and the speed and the pressures of a sudden emergency, the expectations that trust be turned on or off, we all know it's rarely built in sudden and rapid response. It's earned over time. Theme 2, complexity at the community level. It's never going to be just one thing. So communities in crisis aren't facing one singular issue. They're grappling with a stack of them. It could be the public health emergencies we're all here to talk about, disease, they could be outbreaks, they could be issues also though of displacement, of conflict, just fear and insecurity. So in Uganda, for example, where 5 diseases emerged concurrently, SPC teams were confronted with things like message fatigue, with community distrust, and always with the risk of contradictory guidance and overwhelming. So what more can we do to help clarify, not confuse communities, to separate epidemiological needs from information and behaviors that are achievable, relevant, effective, and most importantly, clear. Theme 3, the ethical edge of urgency, meaning that in every crisis, there's sometimes a fine line and a bit of discomfort between speed and harm. And I know the article contributors talked about concerns around ethics sometimes that come up in high pressure environments, where the pressures to create materials in haste can risk excluding those that are fundamental to a response. Children, people with disabilities, non-dominant language speakers. So SPC practitioners described intense debates about what not to say, balancing honesty and transparency with the care, urgency, and dignity that's so necessary in these responses. Also in the pressures of compounded crises, going to theme 4, sometimes as is fundamental to SPC, we need to slow down sometimes to listen. And slow isn't necessarily the right word here, but just making sure we have time protected to listen, and then most importantly, to act, to respond, and arguing frequently that time taking to understand upfront can save time and build trust later. Theme 5, the power and limits of SPC in compounded crises. We all know SPC, community engagement, communications, risk communications, whatever label we're putting on it, is not a silver bullet. It can't resolve operational challenges, vaccine shortages, rebuild homes destroyed by conflict. But in the midst of chaos, chaos or insecurity, it does something pretty vital, right? It helps people navigate uncertainty, make informed decisions, and feel seen and listened to. So when multiple crises converge, contributors agreed SBC needs to work harder and smarter. Theme 6, the last and final theme, that there's a developing new playbook, and you'll hear some of these ideas from the responses in the article for SBC under pressure. So there are opportunities here. There are opportunities to think about pre-positioned networks of trust, which has already come up, having tools that are flexible, protecting time for reflection and considering the implications of data during emergencies, and valuing kind of humility over haste. So in general and in close, as crises become more compounded, interconnected, unpredictable, which seems to be the trend, SBC's role will become even more central and not an afterthought, but as the core pillar of humanitarian response. So please enjoy the article, please enjoy the magazine, and hope that helps. Thanks, Audrey.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your thoughtful remarks. Now it's going to be your turn to give us what you are thinking. So please either scan the QR code or go to menti.com using the code 35442105. I'll give you 30 seconds to join, and then Doris, feel free to share your screen once people are in. I hope you're all in the Menti. Doris, would you like to go ahead and share the questions?
Perfect. Audrey, I just want to confirm you guys can see my screen.
This is perfect, and we see the response coming in. So the first question is, did your last emergency response have a clearly defined and funded RCC budget line from the start? And if we have any francophone on the chat, I'm very happy to translate it to French. La question est donc, est-ce que votre dernière réponse d'urgence disposait-elle dès le départ d'une ligne budgétaire CREC clairement définie et financée? Vincent, are you surprised by the results?
Yeah, I didn't know until when to wait, but we have 32 answers, but only 38 people joined the Menti. So if you're still struggling, you can go to menti.com, and then the code is at the top of the slide we're looking at. No, not really surprised by the response. I mean, fortunately, we do have funding lines in most emergencies that require RCC aspects, even though there are still 5 people here who said that they didn't have any budget, and that's very worrying. The main issue is that indeed funding is usually insufficient, small, and actually if we were to increase the quality of RCC response to the level of what we are describing in the magazine, the interventions themselves would become more expensive. So yeah, a clear issue, a clear topic, something to discuss with donors and partners on the value of real quality RCC here. And
Thank you, Vincent.
Sure.
Let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Doris. So in your context, how often are communities meaningfully involved in decision-making and not just informed during emergency? Et pour mes collègues francophones, dans votre contexte, à quelle fréquence les communautés sont-elles véritablement impliquées dans la prise de décision et pas seulement informées lors d'une urgence?
Okay, we have 75% of the answers now, so I think that the trend is coming out. It's somewhat of a bell curve. Yeah, this is one area where we should, really make a bigger difference, because the whole premise of quality that we discussed is based on matching the realities of what people need, co-owning the design, co-owning the decisions, and making sure that the response is as relevant as possible for those who need it. I guess sometimes is not too bad, but in my opinion, that's not good enough. We also have a good share of people who say rarely. I personally myself try to have community voices included from the governance level with CSO representative all the way to the ground, and the system still somehow resisted. So again, one area for improvement, but glad to see that there are people who manage to include them often, and even a couple of people always.
Exactly. Some good news.
Yeah.
In your last emergency, how was social and behavioral data used? Et encore une fois, pour les collègues francophones, lors de votre dernière urgence, comment les données sociales et comportementales ont-elles été utilisées? It's a real race between collected regularly and used to adapt strategies, and collected but mostly stayed in reports.
Oh. Okay, we are nearing 75% of answers. Yeah, so that's the topic of an entire article. What I personally noticed, first of all, not good enough, right? To have half of the people who say it stays in report, because we do spend a lot of time, efforts, and money, and especially we ask communities to dedicate time to tell us what they think, what they need, how they feel. What I personally noticed is that we're pretty good in RCC at using the data we collect for our own intervention. The biggest worry that I have is to influence the overall operational decisions, like the real driving of the emergency response, not just the interventions that are about connecting and communicating to communities. But still glad to see that there is a majority of people who are using them to adapt strategies.
Ooh, now this is a ranking question. If you could fix one thing to make RCC stronger in the next emergency, what would it be? And just rank your top 3. Donc, si vous pouviez résoudre le seul problème que vous avez dans vos pandémies, dans votre première, excusez-moi, le seul problème pour renforcer la CREC lors de la prochaine urgence, lequel ça serait? Et vous pouvez classer vos 3 premiers.
Okay, so it's going to take a bit more time for people to respond.
I have a feeling that the flexible funding is going to come up first.
As colleagues respond, Audrey, because we are running a bit behind, I still suggest we take 5 minutes for after this for people to come and take the floor if they have any contributions that they want to make. And then, I'll wrap up maybe just a couple of minutes after the hour. If colleagues are able to stay, that'd be great. If not, it was nice to have you. All right, we have less than half, but this is a more difficult question to answer. It seems we need everything. There's really a top 3. Funding is obviously always coming up in these questions, because a lot of the things we are trying to do are dependent on having funding. There's not really any options that entirely excluded. I'm surprised by shifting more leadership and resources to local organizations. That was actually my first, the one I ranked first. But it's okay to disagree on this. Okay, funding is making its race to the top, but yeah, recognition, I guess, that we also need RCC early, permanent community system, social and behavioral data, which is reassuring because these are some of the pillars that we identified in the magazine as something that would improve what we do. I think we could go on to the last one.
So what should be the theme of the next Change magazine? It's a word cloud. Please just drop in your answer. Et du coup, en français, quel devrait être le thème de notre prochain Change magazine?
So that's going to be interesting. Okay, surviving beyond crisis, participation, data for action. I suspect I know who wrote that. It might be a colleague of us named Andres, but I might be wrong. Innovation, financing. That's an interesting thing. Our financing always comes across in everything we do, but we never did a dedicated full study on financing for RCC. Artificial intelligence, yeah, of course, raising element of the response is already in this one. We had a lot of AI-powered things, and on the good side and the bad side for the rumors, for example. The small ones are harder to read, but data for action is getting traction. Participation and innovation as well. Cross-sectoral vision, planetary crisis is in small there. Yeah, it's something I would also consider strongly. In my opinion, that's probably the landscape of the future, unfortunately. Accountability came up multiple times. Preparedness. The nexus, okay. Polycrisis. Vision SBC 2050. Okay, sure, why not? I mean, these are great ideas, colleague and partners. Thank you so much for this. Let's maybe stop here. Oh yeah, there's one more question. Oh, okay, so let's play with this one quickly, and then we can move.
Yeah. Would your team or office be interested in helping disseminate the magazine? Please let us know either in the Menti or also just feel free to send us an email, put it in the chat, however you would like to contribute.
Okay, it's good. This was another check for us to see if it's worth paying the shipment cost, because there is a digital version that can be nicely used. But it's heartwarming to see that some people think that these are valuable assets. All right. Thank you for participating in this. We're a bit late, so Audrey, I suggest we still open the floor for 5 minutes. I mean, we've already lost like about 20 plus colleagues because people have meetings at the hour, but we are recording this. We're gonna put it online. So I think it's still worth giving the floor to colleagues in case they want to contribute further. So let me put up.
We have a great comment from Miriam in the chat, and we have a question actually from Rachana in the Q&A. Would you like to unmute yourself, Rachana? Which is Devashri. Could you unmute Rachana so she can ask a question as well? And you can just have the open discussion. What stood out to you from the stories and reflections we just saw?
Hi, Vincent and Audrey. Thank you so much. Hope you can hear me. This was a great webinar, and kudos, claps, lots of hearts to all of you who spoke. It was really interesting and hooking, as we say. Okay, my question basically is that since COVID, RCCE quality-wise, content-wise, data-wise has really moved upward, and that we sort of experience in our day-to-day life as humanitarians and UN staff. How has the funding scenario changed for it? Has this quality improvement brought in more funds, given that more PHE is something that the sector faced since COVID? So in the last 5 years or so, it's been only responses one after the other. And we have, as a sector, not rested after COVID, really. So that's the question. Over.
Thank you very much, Rachana. Vincent, do you want to take this one?
Nice to see you, Rachana. That's a good question. We have indeed, I think, gained some visibility, became default in the package of what a good response constitutes, which I think obviously is amazing. When it comes to the consequences of moving upward for funding, I couldn't say that we struggle less. And you've seen the responses to the question. A lot of people have put more funding as one of the needs. I do think, though, that we kind of became a default or part of the templates, part of what's expected to be funding, and that reduces the friction and maybe give us more timely funding. I remember at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic, I actually had to fight for RCCE to be one of the lines in the template for the humanitarian appeals. That was not a given. Between then and now, RCCE is one of the core predictable offer from UNICEF in the public health emergency framework, and we are considered by default, even without interventions, as an element that should be funded. So yeah, I do think we gained a bit of prominence in there. Now the problem is going to be attracting enough funding, especially if we are trying to increase the quality, because the more granular we go, the more specific we go for at-risk population, the more segmentation, the more quality, the more funding we will need. So we're not there, but we improved, I guess, would be my...
Thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you, Rachana. I'm guessing we're already 5 minutes past the hours. I don't see any other questions. So I put it in the chat. We have 2 pages, one in English, one in French. We also have like a little game at the beginning of the magazine on the front page if you wanna play it. So thank you very much for joining. It was wonderful to work on this magazine from a personal perspective. Vincent, over to you.
A few words to conclude. So the link to the magazine is here on this last slide. The QR code to the left gives you access to the full digital version. We will ship some of these copies to the colleagues, in particular in country offices, some partners, donors. So, if you're interested or if you're worried that it's not going to reach you, just let us know. I just want to thank you everyone for joining us. Maybe emphasize that this is really a collective product, a process of co-creation, country offices, partners, authors in the field, designers, editors, and the communities themselves who shared their time and their stories. I want to give a shout out to the partners at Common Thread, who helped us bring this thing to life. I can't cite them all, but I want to thank Doris. Doris, thank you for managing us as a group. Mike and Shireen for being good sparring partners as usual when we debate big ideas. Jim and Katrina for helping us turn these reflections into a really beautiful product. And your design is always amazing. I want to thank the contributors and the donors who made the RCC response on the ground possible with their generous contribution. I hope you understood that more is needed, and we hope we convinced you of it, and you will be even more convinced once you read the publication. Let's all continue our advocacy with institutional leaders so that we can protect and expand investments in working with communities. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that the lessons from these responses and the voices from the front lines really shape what we do next time, because there will be a next time. Let's be very clear about that. So the more ready we are, the more lives we'll save. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure. And feel free to reach out if you need anything. Bye-bye.